Hi, everybody. Here we are, coaches, and we're going to have a little connection time today about the idea of how to forgive after you have experienced severe trauma. Because we all know we need to. Maybe we know we need to. We may not know that for a while, and we may not want to for a very long while, and we may feel like we can't, like it's literally something we cannot do. The hurt is so deep, the wounding is so severe, the way it impacts our body, our mind, our spirit, our psyche, all of that. Trauma is so devastating, and it can really impact us into a place where um, we either don't know, we don't want to, or we feel like we cannot forgive. So let's talk about that for just a minute, and then we'll talk about how and if we need to, and what do you do. So what are your thoughts, ladies?
Well, when you brought up the topic of forgiveness, two things came to mind for me, and that was forgiveness of the trauma that our adopted child brought to our family, but then also forgiveness of the people that judged us. So, there's sort of two paths there for me.
Well, and maybe even more, like, because we can
Yeah,
throw
yeah,
in the adoption agency or social workers or doctors or therapists or
yes,
Family, extended family, spouse,
yes, yes, yes,
myself.
yes, yes, yeah.
There's lots of forgiveness. And I think we get the biggest hurdle in the beginning is just to get to that, get out of the cognitive dissonance of what has happened here. Like
Mhm,
we're just so in like the shock and awe
yeah.
mhm.
overwhelms our capacities and probably our spouses. And so then you have that whole dynamic of obviously the child's overwhelmed. You have that dynamic, and then your biological kids or other children in the home, regardless of how they got there. All everybody's overwhelmed, and as the
Right.
mom, you're the one trying to figure all that out and support everybody. And then when you add all the outside stuff beyond that of church people and school people and like the adoption world and everything we were told that's not turned out to be true.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's
we're
just
talking
that.
about misinformation and betrayal and flat out falsehood,
Mhm.
and you know, from your
Judgment.
adoption training on, where you're told rad is very rare and you'll be fine, and then we believe it, because we want to, and people don't tell you the
I
truth.
want to believe it's true.
Oh, I know, because if God called me, then it will be okay, and then it's not okay. And so then
and
you,
we want to believe it's true, so we keep trying to make it true. So that
Mhm.
whole first thing, that's why I said getting out of that cognitive dissonance and into acceptance of reality
Mhm.
is probably the biggest piece. And
Mhm.
that, cause then when you get through that, and you like are looking at reality and you're realizing this isn't going to work and I have to make a decision, then the grief hits of all the
Yes.
things.
Well, and
And
that's where the
sometimes we get,
anger too, like
and
we
some,
talked
I was
about
going to
last
say,
time.
yeah, sometimes we get stuck in the anger first because the grief is too painful.
Mhm.
So it's just like all the unfairness and all of that, everything we have to be angry, legitimate, righteous anger in a
Mhm.
lot of spaces and places. And then below that is the grief. And it's a process. There are layers upon layers and stages upon stages. And if you don't have grace for yourself first, and support, I just,
Well, and I think even a true biblical understanding of what forgiveness is and what it's not,
Mhm.
because forgiveness is not about staying in harmful relationships. It's not about forgiving and then just taking it over and over and over and over. Are we to forgive every time? Yes, but many times I was in church so many times and the topic of forgiveness would come up and I would kind of throw up a little in my throat and try, but like I was not there. And one thing I recognized, and I've watched this in coaching numerous clients who struggle with this, when you get stuck in the anger, when you get stuck in the bitterness and the resentment and all of that, we do need to forgive, but first, we have to understand what it is that has been done to us. We have to know how it's impacted us. We have to know what it's cost us financially, emotionally, relationally, psychologically, with our health, all of that. We have to know what it's cost us, because when we forgive, we want to forgive all of it, so that, you know, our pastor described it this way, like if there's 100 pounds that needs forgiving and we only forgive 30 pounds, then we're still carrying 70 pounds of unforgiveness around and it's still damaging us. And sometimes it takes a while to even know what it is you need to forgive. So,
Exactly.
one of the ways that I coach people is to write out a list of everything that this has cost them, every person or organization or institution or whatever that has hurt them. And you have to get it all out there to understand why you're even suffering as badly as you are, because you may think, well, why is this impacting me so bad? You don't even realize all the losses and all that it's cost you. And then once you can get it all out on paper and see how it's damaged you, and even then it takes some time, because that'll put you into anger for a bit. And anger is part of grieving. And so as you get past the anger, and go back and watch the last Connecting with the Coaches on anger about how to do that, getting into the more vulnerable feelings of the hurt and the betrayal and all of that, then we have something to take to God and have him take it from us, have him heal us from that. And as he heals that, then we can say, I forgive this person for that, and that, and that, and all the ways that that has cost me in my life, for everything that I lost because of this. I can make the choice to forgive. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I do think it is a matter of like reflecting on all of that, because you put a blanket forgiveness over everything and you're not really like acknowledging all those little pieces that are underneath that blanket. And so I think it is important to write them down, because I think they can even get lost in our mind, because there's so much going on, and so much hurt. And I also just think that, you know, clients that I've seen have said, well, I feel like I should, forgive. Well, then you're not ready, to do that. And I always stress to them that God is patient with us,
Mhm.
right? He's not, standing behind us with a stick in our back, pushing us, to forgive. And he's very patient. And, we can even have a conversation with him about like helping us walk through that and helping us to be able to be to a place where we can forgive.
Yeah, praying for the desire to forgive.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
I think being able to have some kind of a support, especially with people who have been through it, to just have our pain as we're witnessing it for ourselves, maybe even for the first time, recognizing all the things as we're coming out of that cognitive dissonance, and then just having a witness to the pain of when, especially as there's been judgment and isolation for sometimes years, um, to have somebody who can say, I see your pain and I care about your pain and it matters.
Mhm.
Just having a witness to that opens you up to be able to let it go. But
Yeah,
as long as you've never been seen, as long as your pain has never been seen, nobody has ever cared about it, um, or you've not been able to admit it or say it, or some combination of all of that, I think that's what keeps us stuck in a lot of ways. Is if you can't let it go because you you haven't honored it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a definition. It's like we need to know what it is we're forgiving, and so you have to speak it or write it or have it heard and validated. You don't want to dwell in that, but I I think that's so
You can't
important.
skip it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't skip it. And
Yep.
I know a lot of people who are like, well, you know, I'll just pop back from this and I'll just, it's, that's not how we're made. That's not how we work. We have to acknowledge, we have to count the cost of what has been done to us. Um, and another thing we learned at our church about forgiveness, it's kind of like if you can picture yourself when you're ready to do it, because you have to wait. Yeah. And I learned like you can forgive in layers because you forgive what you know to forgive right now. But then as time goes on, especially with us, I just remember like a year or two later, all of a sudden, oh, here's this big event. And us placing our son with a new family, all of a sudden, we're trying to put together a video or a picture montage for our daughter's graduation. How are we going to do that? How do you, these 8 years have, you know, all the pictures? What do you do? It's like, oh, it impacts this too. And I just remember saying that over and over again. Oh, it impacts this too. And as I started realizing I was doing that, that's where it's like, oh, I need to forgive this too. I need to forgive whatever it was also. And I didn't even know that. I had forgiven everything I knew to forgive. But then, whenever you notice that there's bitterness or resentment or anything like that, that's telling you you have something else to forgive. And so, what our church recommended for when you're at that point of needing to forgive and you know you need to forgive and you're ready and you may not feel, you're never going to feel 100% like woohoo, but like we need to do it in faith so that we're free, really, so that we're not carrying that around, because the
It really
bitterness
is an
and
act of
resentment,
obedience. Yeah.
and it eats you alive. I mean,
Yeah.
it impacts our health, it impacts our relationship, it impacts our ability to hear God, it impacts everything. So we do have to, we have to for our own good. But when we're ready, I remember him giving, our pastor giving us a picture of a courtroom, and you take all of this that has been done to you, you take it before the judge and you lay it all out there. They did this and this and this, and it cost me this and this and this. And the judge, the good and just judge, slams the gavel down and says, guilty. They absolutely did it, and they deserve to pay. And then at that point, you can see the bailiff or whoever cuffing this person and taking them over to the cell. And at that point, you get to make the determination, are you going to lock them up and hold them in your heart in that bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness, or are you going to uncuff them and let them go and let God deal with them? And it's painful sometimes. I've done it through tears, I've done it through anger, but I had to do it. And then as soon as you do it, usually there's tears, and they're freeing tears, because now you're not bound to that person by what they've done to you. And it's really hard. And really, the only way you can do it is if you recognize how much you have been forgiven. And so when you can recognize what Jesus did on the cross and that he had to pay for that for me, then I can, oh, okay, God, I'm going to let them off the hook because you let me off the hook.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do think that you know, a lot of people when they even start thinking about forgiveness, they may have been told growing up that forgiveness means that you forgive and you forget and you move on and have a relationship with that person, right? But true forgiveness from the Bible does not have to equal reconciliation.
Mm-mm.
And so that's sort of one thing I learned along this journey, is that You know, God doesn't stay in a relationship that's toxic and keep subjecting yourself to that. But you can forgive the person, and it doesn't mean that you have to reconcile that relationship. So I think that's an important thing for people to remember, because I think not understanding that piece can prohibit people from even forgiving, because they're like, well, I'm not going to forgive them because I don't want to be
Right.
in a with them.
That's so good, Jen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think also like we have to recognize the difference between the fact that forgiveness is based only on us. Reconciliation would be a two-person
Yes.
thing. And then forgiveness is about the past and trust is about the future. And if somebody has destroyed your trust, they would need to do some work to rebuild that before you stay in relationship. Or you can set the boundaries wider and wider. I'm only going to see them in this kind of situation. Or if and over the years, if they're growing too, and if they're forgiving and healing too, then maybe it can come back together in some type of relationship. But it takes both people for the relationship to continue and for trust to move forward.
Right. Right.
Yeah. What other thoughts do you guys have on forgiveness? Maybe we covered it all. That's a lot of what I work on with my clients, and I find myself having to do it over and over again. Like I said, there's just in fact, we talked about this not too long ago in a connecting with the coaches. We all kind of have had physical impact from this trauma. And just recently, I was at a Bible study where the leader was talking about forgiving the doctors who either misdiagnosed or didn't believe you, or treated it with something that actually made it worse, or whatever. And that just was another whole layer that I had never thought about. Oh, I didn't realize I was harboring some unforgiveness because none of those people are in my life anymore. And so I wasn't thinking about it. But then it's like, oh, well, I absolutely did have some resentment and bitterness over that. And so I sat down that day. It was the day before Easter, and I remember thinking, okay, I got to be forgiven. I have to have forgiven before I go to church on Easter. So I sat down with my list, and it's like, oh God, forgive me for having such bitterness and against them for what they had done to me. I forgive them. I set them free. Purify me, cleanse me. Because that's another thing that I think we could talk about for just a minute, is that sometimes when we have that unforgiveness, it actually causes us to do things that then need forgiving.
Yes.
Because when we walk around in unforgiveness, we start doing things that are offensive to other people. We can destroy our own relationships because of our unforgiveness. And it may not be the person you're in relationship with that you need to forgive. It could be other people. But when you walk around with that heart of unforgiveness, it flings
It
arrows at
divides.
everybody around you. It's toxic.
Yep.
So I feel like, what you guys said earlier, we have to have our pain and our trauma acknowledged. It needs to be seen and heard and honored. And as we start writing or talking about it, and we get a list going, or however it works for you, it could be just topics or different people or whatever, and you start counting the cost and recognizing what it's doing to you inside, and that you really need to forgive biblically, but also because it's what's healthy for you. God knows He created us, and He knows we need to forgive. And as you start forgiving other people and letting them off the hook, then a lot of times it leads you to recognizing how you have hurt other people and how you may need to go ask for forgiveness for certain things as well. And as you have forgiven and then you ask forgiveness and receive it, then you're cleaned out. And then you'll hear from God better, you'll have better discernment, you'll be healthier physically and emotionally and spiritually. And that's a huge part of the healing process.
Yeah. One more thing I was thinking of, Carrie, is just that, one thing that I really learned along the way was that forgiveness really is between us and God.
Mhm.
Forgiveness doesn't mean that we need to have that person in the room. You
Mm-mm.
know, it
Very
really is,
true.
my heart is lined up with God, and I'm honoring him and who I'm forgiving and how I'm going about that. He knows my heart. So it really is between us and God. And it
Well, and I
doesn't,
think that's so important, Jen, because if, let's say that the person doesn't know or believe that they have hurt you, and then you
Mhm.
go up and announce that you are forgiving them, and their heart is not in that
Yes.
place, you could cause more damage by
Mhm.
doing that. And so, if they know they've done it and they ask for forgiveness, that's fantastic. But if they don't, we still need to forgive, even if they're unrepentant, even if they
Mhm.
have no idea or they're just clueless. We
Mhm.
still need to forgive, but we don't necessarily do it in person.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make.
Yeah.
Okay, any last thoughts on this topic?
And that's why we need each other, because
Mhm.
we do need somebody to just that emotional support of,
Yeah,
I honor that this your family, your mom, your sister, your husband, they never got it, they're never gonna get it, and
it's
you have
painful.
to go on, and you have to go on. And
Mhm.
so I want to support you in you going on.
Yeah,
And our coaching one-on-one was what did it for me the most. But I've seen these groups just do absolute amazing things happen in the groups. And the retreats
mhm,
are they're just so special because your spouse can be there too.
yeah,
And so that just is a whole nother level.
right.
And so there are just all these ways that we have, because we went through it without those things for the
Yeah.
most part. And so now we just have developed so many things. The Lord's just giving us more and
All
more
the things
ideas.
we needed that we didn't have.
Yeah. And so just to be able to reach out and support yourself by getting yourself the support that you need.
Yes. Well, and I want to mention, first of all, Jen, you're starting a group on May 10th, 2013, um, in case there are couples that would like to join a group
2013.
together. What did I say?
You said 2013.
Okay, so I still have a
10
little
years
trauma
late.
brain. How about 2023? I had the three down and I was thinking, well, if somebody watches this next year, we may not have a group starting May 10th. I wanted to get the right year, but anyway, pardon me. Um, Thanks for all being so grace-filled. 2023, yeah, Jen's going to start a new couples support group. And how many couples do you have left that you could take?
I believe there are two more spots for two more couples.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you're seeing this and it's before May 10th of
Mhm.
2023, go to carryotool.com and look under the store and you'll find, or resources, and you can find the groups, and that's
Mhm.
for the couples support group. And yeah, we do coaching like this all the time. If you need some help getting to forgiveness or having the desire to forgive, or even understanding why you would need to, or figuring out what you need to forgive. Sometimes, like, we all had to have help with that because
Mhm.
the trauma that we've been through is complex and it's hard to understand. So if you can find somebody who's been there and gets the majority of what you might need to forgive, we can walk you through that process and give you some practical assignments and activities to do that will help you get the freedom that you need. And that's what we love to do. So check us out at carryotool.com. We're here for you. You're not alone. And yeah, we love all of you. And we just pray for your freedom and your healing. So see you again back here next time. Thank you, guys. Oh, I tried to end the meeting. I'm